These, being frightened, cried out. Welcome back. This is Edward Reed's Buddhist Books Podcast, episode 128, Tipiṭaka, part 65, in which I will recite Pācittiya 54, and maybe 55. We will see how it goes. Did you miss me? I was gone for a couple days. Was it 3 days? I just thought I'd, real quick, write and publish another book. You can hear more about that here. It's called the DNA alphabet. Very dramatic. And what else? If this is your first time seeing me, go ahead, and I have to put a certain amount of seconds in between those links, so I'm stalling a little bit. Go ahead and click here. That will take you to the Tipiṭaka playlist. I'm talking to the people on YouTube, of course. And then you can start with episode 1, or rather part 1 of Tipiṭaka, rather than part 65, so things will make a little more sense. And let's see, what else? Is there anything else? For those of you listening to the audio-only version on the podcast, hello! If you're interested, go on Amazon and type in the DNA alphabet. That top one, it's a black cover, says VH Frater BT as the author. That's me. It's one of the noms de plume that I go by. And if it's not available in your country, if you could please add it to the wish list. And then the more people do that, the more these third-party publishers will see that and say, we got to make that available in that country. So that would be a big help. For those of you who want to look at it on Kindle where it's available, please do. And please do give it 5 stars when you're done reading it. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, no need to review it. Just skip that part. Anyway, hope everybody's doing well. Cheers. I'd like to welcome, of course, our special guest, Lord Buddha. And he's been on the show before, obviously. Let's get to the reading. Getting toward the end of Book 2 of the 6 books of the rules. Expiation. Pācittiya 54. At one time, the Enlightened One, the Lord, was staying at Kosambi in Gosita's monastery. Now at that time, the Venerable Channa indulged in bad habits. You remember Channa? All right. The monks said, quote, "Reverend Channa, do not do that. It is not allowable," end quote. He did the same, parentheses, things, close parentheses, out of disrespect. Those who were modest monks, 3 dots, spread it about, saying, quote, "How can the Venerable Channa do a disrespectful thing?" End quote, 3 dots. Just in case this is the first of Edward Reed's Buddhist books that you're hearing, the 3 dots means that I.B. Horner, the translator of the Pali into English, determined that, this phrase, word, or, sentence or paragraph has been mentioned at some point in the previous 2 books or in future books, so I'm just going to replace it with 3 dots and let everybody kind of figure out what it's saying in context, which I hate, and I don't use that word lightly. I hate it. Oh, don't hate. Hate is not a good thing, not a good emotion. It's completely contrary to the essence of the teachings of Lord Buddha and indeed the teachings of many other great sages and masters as well. I know. I know. But I hate it when she does that. Anyway, sorry. Spread it about saying, quote, we already said that. Quote, is it true, as is said, that you, Chana, did a disrespectful thing? End quote. Quote, it is true, Lord. End quote. The enlightened one, the Lord, rebuked him, saying, how can you, foolish man, do a disrespectful thing? It is not, foolish man, for pleasing those who are not, parentheses, yet, close parentheses, pleased. 3 dots. It just seems to me that if you're translating, like, Lord of the Rings from English into French, you give it a certain amount of respect. You don't replace Tolkien's words with 3 dots. How much the more so is it a crime and a sin to replace words of the original, earliest, 2,000-year-old Buddhist scriptures with 3 dots? That's all I'm saying. I'm not going to get worked up about it. I'm just saying. These are kind of a little dull sometimes, so I'm bringing a little. Someone was telling me that they were falling asleep or kind of tuning in and out and listening to one of these. So, wake up! Just kidding. Okay. And thus, monks, this rule of training should be set forth. In disrespect, there is an offense of expiation. End quote. By the way, Polytech Society. Yes, thank you so much. You guys are great. Is there any way to come out with new versions of everything that don't replace words of sacred scripture with 3 dots? Because, I mean, that's horrible. It's horrible. You wouldn't do it with the Bible? You wouldn't do it with Tolkien? Why is it okay to do it with ancient Buddhist scriptures? Just saying. Disrespect, speaking of which, disrespect means there are 2, parentheses, kinds of, close parentheses, disrespect. Disrespect for a man and disrespect for Dhamma. Disrespect for a man means if spoken to by one who is ordained concerning what is laid down, thinking, this one is suspended or disparaged or blameworthy, his bidding will not come to be done. That was quotes within quotes. I think that's when they're thinking, then it's the single quote. Anyway, he does a disrespectful thing. There is an offense of expiation. Disrespect for Dhamma means replacing scripture with 3 dots. If being spoken to by one who is ordained concerning what is laid down, parentheses, saying, close parentheses, quote-ish, thought quote, how may this be lost or destroyed or disappear? Or he does not wish to learn this, end quote, thought quote. He does a disrespectful thing. There is an offense of expiation. If he thinks that he is ordained when he is ordained, parentheses, and, close parentheses, does a disrespectful thing, there is an offense of expiation. If he is in doubt as to whether he is ordained, 3 dots. If he thinks that he is not ordained when he is ordained, 3 dots. Offense of expiation. If being spoken to by one who is ordained concerning what is not laid down, thinking, thought quote, this does not conduce to expunging, parentheses, evil, close parentheses, and thought quote, nor to punctiliousness, nor to graciousness, nor to decreasing, parentheses, the obstructions, close parentheses, nor to putting forth energy, and thought quote, he does a disrespectful thing. There is an offense of wrongdoing. If being spoken to by one who is not ordained, concerning what is laid down or concerning what is not laid down, thinking, quote, within quotes, thought, quote, whatever, this does not conduce to expunging, parentheses, evil, close parentheses, 3 dots, nor to putting forth energy, close thought parentheses, he does a disrespectful thing, like use 3 dots. There is an offense of wrongdoing. If he thinks that he is ordained when he is not ordained, there is an offense of wrongdoing. If he is in doubt as to whether he is not ordained, there is an offense of wrongdoing. If he thinks that he is not ordained when he is not ordained, there is an offense of wrongdoing. There is no offense if he speaks saying, quote within quotes. This is speech, though, not thinking, and there's no quotes that these quotes are within. Oh, well, it's just no rules. No rules. Thus, the version of our teachers is an interrogation. Okay, there is no offense if he speaks saying, quote, thus the version of our teachers is an interrogation, end quote. If he is mad, if he is the first wrongdoer. The fourth, meaning the 54th. Okay. Let's you and I, and by that I mean me, take a moment to chill out about the 3 dots. It's been a while since I've let myself get worked up about the 3 dots. When I first started reading these, you might remember if you've been listening to the whole thing, there were a couple of episodes where I got worked up about the 3 dots and then was very apologetic afterward about, oh, I'm sorry, I just was ranting and raving about how disrespectful it is to replace scripture with 3 dots. But having flashbacks. All right, so now mellow, happy Edward is going to read and feel nothing but love for the Polytech Society when he reads the 3 dots. But seriously, thank you, Polytech Society. You guys are great, except for the 3 dots. Expiation, Pācittiya, 55. At one time, the Enlightened One, the Lord, was staying at Savatthi in the Jeta Grove in Anathapindika's monastery. Now, at that time, the group of 6 monks was frightened. Oh, excuse me. The group of 6 monks frightened the group of 17 monks. These, being frightened, cried out. Monks spoke thus, quote, why do you, your reverences, cry out? End quote. Quote, your reverences, this group of 6 monks frightened us. End quote. Those who were modest monks, 3 dots, spread it about, saying, quote, how can the group of 6 monks frighten a monk? End quote. Tickling, frightening these guys. 3 dots. Parentheses. See Pācittiya 52, 1. End parentheses. 3 more dots. Oh. Quote, 3 more dots. Isn't it nice? Should be set forth. Whatever monk should frighten a monk, there is an offense of expiation. End quote. Whatever means, all right, I promised it. Here's the flashback to Tipiṭaka Part 5, in which we were reading Parajika 1, which was when whatever was actually defined, and ever since then it's been replaced by 3 dots. Okay, whatever means he who, on account of his relations, on account of his social standing, on account of his name, on account of his clan, on account of his morals, on account of his dwelling, on account of his field of activity, in parentheses, an elder or a novice or one of middle standing, this is called whatever. She didn't even put 3 dots. She wrote, whatever means is a monk understood in this case. All right, so that was whatever. Monk means he is a monk because he is a beggar for alms, a monk because he submits to wandering for alms, a monk because he is one who wears the patchwork cloth, a monk by the designation, parentheses, of others, end parentheses, a monk on account of his knowledge, on account of his acknowledgement. A monk is called, quote, come, monk, end parentheses. A monk is endowed with going to the 3 refuges. A monk is auspicious. A monk is the essential. A monk is a learner. A monk is an adept. A monk means one who is endowed with harmony for the order. With the resolution at which the motion is put 3 times and then followed by the decision with actions, parentheses, in accordance with Dhamma and the discipline, end parentheses. with steadfastness, with attributes of a man perfected. Whatever monk is endowed with harmony for the order, with the resolution at which the motion is put 3 times, and then followed by the decision with actions, parentheses, in accordance with Dhamma and the discipline. I think that's implied, right? Maybe that's what they're saying. Okay, end parentheses. With steadfastness, okay, actions, like not just any old action, like actions that are, anyway. With steadfastness and the attributes of a man perfected, this one is a monk as understood in meaning, in this meaning. All right. Monk means another monk. So monk was defined twice. Stricter rules for definitions in dictionaries post 6th century BC or whenever this was written. Should frighten means, whenever the original copy was written, I mean, if one who is ordained, desirous of frightening one who is ordained, arranges a form of a sound or smell or a taste or a touch, whether he is afraid or whether he is not afraid, there is an offense of expiation. So if you attempt to frighten somebody but fail, they don't get frightened, it's still expiation, which means making amends, right? Did they ever explain what that means? Anyway, if he points out the wilds of thieves, or the wilds of beasts or of prey, or the wilds of goblins, whether he is afraid or whether he is not afraid, there is an offense of expiation. If he thinks that he is ordained when he is ordained, parentheses, and, close parentheses, frightens, parentheses, him, close parentheses, there is an offense of expiation. If he is in doubt as to whether he is ordained, 3 dots. If he thinks that he is not ordained when he is ordained, parentheses, and, close parentheses, frightens, parentheses, him, close parentheses, there is an offense of expiation. If he is desirous of frightening one who is not ordained, parentheses, and, close parentheses, arranges a form 3 dots, a touch, whether he is afraid or whether he is not afraid, there is an offense of wrongdoing. If he points out the wilds of thieves, 3 dots, or whether he is not afraid, there is an offense of wrongdoing. If he thinks that he is ordained when he is not ordained, there is an offense of wrongdoing. If he is in doubt as to whether he is not ordained, there is an offense of wrongdoing. Honestly, I think that monks shouldn't be frightening like random people walking down the street. I think that that should be more of a rule than their fellow monk. Maybe. I don't know. If he is in doubt as to whether he is not ordained, there is an offense of wrongdoing. If he thinks that he is not ordained when he is not ordained, there is an offense of wrongdoing. There is no offense if not desirous of frightening. He arranges a form or a sound or a smell or a taste or a touch, or points out the wilds of thieves or the wilds of beasts of prey or the wilds of goblins, if he is mad, if he is the first wrongdoer. The 5th, meaning the 55th. So I know I was like smiling and talking about how lovely the 3 dots are, which it was sarcasm. And so this time I'm not going to do that either. I'm just going to read it. But I'm going to point out where the 3 dots are, obviously, because I don't always know what it needs to be filled in with. And I need to let you know that they're there. So as I normally do, I'll just say 3 dots whenever there's 3 dots. Without anger, without sarcastic happiness. Just accepting the 3 dots as a part of my day today, if you will. All right, I'm going to need some coffee for this. Expiation. Pācittiya. 56. 3 dots, right, it starts with 3 dots, so I always have to fill in. At one time, the enlightened one, the Lord. Because who wants to take the time to write that out? It's so repetitive. Let's just replace it with 3 dots. No, I get it. She's racist. No. At one time, the enlightened one, the Lord, was staying in the Bhaga country at Crocodile Hill disrespectful of Buddhism. Maybe she's Christian or something. Yes. At one time, the enlightened one, the Lord, was staying in the Bhaga country at Crocodile Hill in Besakala Grove in the Deer Park, or just sort of agnostic atheist approaching ancient sacred Buddhist scriptures as sort of a curiosity to be explored like from a scholarly position. I assume. I can only assume based on how many times she replaces things with 3 dots. Now, at that time, kindling in the wintertime, a fire of large hollow logs warmed themselves. Oh, now at that time, monks kindling in the wintertime a fire of large hollow logs warmed themselves. And in that hollow, a dark poisonous snake was scorched by the fire. Issuing forth, he pursued the monks. The monks ran about here and there. Those who were modest monks looked down upon, criticized, spread it about, saying, okay, who did something wrong? The snake? Quote, how can these monks kindling a fire warm themselves? Really? Is that going to be a crime in the ancient Theravadan order? Starting a fire to warm yourself? I guess because you can harm that's a big concern, but you're not even supposed to dig dirt. So I guess from like that sort of Jainist absolute pacifism, don't harm any microscopic organisms point of view, then yeah, I guess starting a fire with some logs would be out. Wow. Wow. All right. How can these monks kindling a fire warm themselves? End quote. 3 dots. Quote, is it true, as is said, that you, monks, kindling a fire, warmed yourselves? It is true, Lord. The enlightened one, the Lord, rebuked them, saying, quote, how, monks, can these foolish men, kindling a fire, warm themselves? It is not, monks, for pleasing those who are not, parentheses, yet, close parentheses, pleased, 3 dots. And thus, monks, this rule of training should be set forth. Whatever monk desirous of warming himself should kindle or should cause a fire to be kindled, there is an offense of expiation. End quote. And thus this rule of training for monks came to be laid down by the Lord. Now, at that time the monks became ill. Monks inquiring after the ill ones spoke thus to the ill monks, quote, we hope that your reverences are better. We hope that you are keeping going. End quote. Quote, formerly, your reverences, we, kindling a fire, used to warm ourselves. Thus there came to be comfort for us. But now it is forbidden by the Lord. Quote, parentheses, and parentheses, being scrupulous, we do not warm ourselves. Thus there comes to be no comfort for us. They told this matter to the Lord. He said, quote, I allow you, monks, when a monk is ill, kindling or causing a fire to be kindled to warm yourselves. And thus, monks, this rule of training should be set forth. Whatever monk, not being ill, desirous of warming himself, should kindle or should cause a fire to be kindled, there is an offense of expiation. End quote. And thus this rule of training for monks came to be laid down by the Lord. Now, at that time, monks being scrupulous did not light a lamp in the fire room or in the bathroom. They told this matter to the Lord. He said, quote, I allow you, monks, to kindle or to cause a fire to be kindled when there is a sufficient reason for it. And thus, 3 dots should be set forth. Whatever monk, not being ill, desirous of warming himself, should kindle or cause a fire to be kindled, unless there is sufficient reason for it, there is an offense of expiation. Whatever means, you remember, right? Monk means. Not being ill means he for whom there comes to be comfort without a fire. All right. If it's very cold, then I imagine that would be sufficient reason. Ill means he for whom there does not come to be comfort without a fire. Yeah, when it's freezing, freaking cold. Desirous of warming himself means wishing to heat himself. A fire means what is called a fire. Should kindle means he himself kindles. There is an offense of expiation. Should cause to be kindled means if he commands another, there is an offense of expiation. When once commanded, if he kindles much, there is an offense of expiation. Unless there is a sufficient reason for it means setting aside a sufficient reason for it. If he thinks that he is not ill when he is ill, parentheses, and, close parentheses, desirous of warming himself, kindles or causes a fire to be kindled unless there is a sufficient reason for it. There is an offense of expiation. If he is in doubt as to whether he is not ill, 3 dots. If he thinks that he is ill when he is not ill, 3 dots. Offense of expiation. If he picks up a fallen firebrand, there is an offense of wrongdoing. If he thinks that he is not ill when he is ill, there is an offense of wrongdoing. If he thinks that he is ill when he is ill, there is no offense. There is no offense if he is ill, if he warms himself at one made by another, if he warms himself over raked out embers, if at a lamp, in a fire room, in a bathroom, if there is sufficient reason for it, if there are dangers, if he is mad, if he is the first wrongdoer. The 6th, meaning the 56th. All right. Shall we read one more? I think so. Expiation, Pācittiya, 57. At one time, the Enlightened One, the Lord, was staying at Rajagaha in the bamboo grove at the squirrel's feeding place. Now, at that time, the monks used to bathe in the Tipiṭaka. There's a line over the A, so I'm emphasizing that. A lake and also a river. The hot waters, the lake was cool, but the river flowing from it was hot. Now at that time, King Saniya Bambisara of Magadha, thinking, quote, I will bathe, parentheses, my, close parentheses, head, end quote, having gone to the Tipiṭaka, waited for, parentheses, them, close parentheses, at a respectful distance, thinking, quote, parentheses, I will wait, close parentheses, as long as the masters bathe, end quote. The monks bathed until the dark of the night. Then King Saniya Bambisara of Magadha, bathing, parentheses, his, close parentheses, head, at the wrong time, stayed outside the town because the town gate was closed. When it was early morning, approached the Lord, anointed, perfumed. Having greeted the Lord, he sat down at a respectful distance. As he was sitting down at a respectful distance, the Lord spoke thus to King Saniya Bambisara of Magadha. If I'm not mistaken, he was the king from Parajika II, when I forget the name of the monk, but one monk had said that he had permission to take the wood when he didn't, and so the rule about stealing, he got thrown out if you steal, was established. Quote, why do you, sire, come in the early morning, anointed, perfumed, end quote. Then King Saniya Bambisara of Magadha told this matter to the Lord. Magadha, right? Then the Lord aroused, delighted King Seniya Bambisara of Magad with Dhammatak. Then King Seniya Bambisara of Magad, having been roused, delighted by the Lord with Dhammatak, rising from his seat, greeting the Lord, departed, keeping his right side towards him. Then the Lord, on this occasion, in this connection, having had the order of monks convened, questioned the monks, saying, quote, "Is it true, as is said, monks, that monks, though having seen the king, not knowing moderation, bathed," well, please don't be a rule against bathing, quote, "It is true, Lord," and, quote, "the enlightened one, the Lord, rebuked them, saying," quote, "How, monks, can these foolish men, though having seen the king, not knowing moderation, bathe? It is not, monks, for pleasing those who are not, yet, pleased, And thus, monks, this rule of training should be set forth. Whatever monk should bathe, at intervals of, less than half a month, there is an offense of expiation. End quote. And thus this rule of training for monks came to be laid down by the Lord. I have to say that up till now, when I imagined myself in the company of the original Buddhist Sangha, I had not imagined that they didn't bathe, but once every 2 weeks. Now at that time, monks, being scrupulous, did not bathe in the hot weather, in the fever weather. They lay down with limbs covered with sweat, robes and lodgings got soiled. They told this matter to the Lord. That's what I'm saying. He said, quote, "I allow you monks in the hot weather, in the fever weather, to bathe, at intervals of, less than half a month." Thank Buddha. I was going to say God. Silly. And thus, monks, this rule of training should be set forth. Whatever monk should bathe, at intervals of, less than half a month, except at the right time, there is an offense of expiation. This is a right time in this case. Thinking, a month and a half of the summer remains. And, in the first month of the rains. These are 2.5 months when there is hot weather, when there is fever weather. In this case, this is a right time. End quote. And thus this rule of training for monks came to be laid down by the Lord. Now, at that time, monks became ill. Monks inquiring after the ill ones spoke thus to the ill monks. Quote, "We hope that your reverences are better. We hope that you are keeping going." End quote. Quote, "Formerly, your reverences, we used to bathe, at intervals of, less than half a month. Thus there came to be comfort for us. But now it is forbidden by the Lord, being scrupulous, we do not bathe. Thus there comes to be no comfort for us." End quote. They told this matter to the Lord. He said, quote, "I allow you monks, when a monk is ill, to bathe, at intervals of, less than half a month. And thus, monks, this rule of training should be set forth. Whatever monk should bathe, at intervals of, less than half a month, except at the right time, there is an offense of expiation. This is a right time in this case, when there is fever weather, at a time of illness. In this case, this is a right time. When it is hot, that's what needed 3 dots, just to make it less clear. All right. End quote. And thus this rule of training for monks came to be laid down by the Lord. Now, At that time, monks making repairs, being scrupulous, did not bathe. They lay down with limbs covered with sweat. Robes and lodgings got soiled. They told this matter to the Lord. Quote, I allow you monks at a time of work to bathe, parentheses, at intervals of, close parentheses, less than half a month. And thus, monks, this rule of training should be set forth. I feel like this could have all been solved if he had just made one rule, that if you see a king waiting for you to finish bathing, just say, hey, come on in. That's okay, you can bathe with us. And if he insists not to, then get out of the water. That's the only rule that needs to be established. It's all this stuff about bathing, not bathing. It's a different time. It's a different time. Yes. All right. You remember there were the monks that were bathing whenever they wanted to, and, that was like an example of decadent behavior. All right. Anyway, and thus this rule of training should be set forth. Whatever monk should bathe, parentheses, at intervals of, close parentheses, less than half a month, except at a right time, there is an offense of expiation. 4 dots. End quote. And thus this rule of training for monks came to be laid down by the Lord. Now, at that time, monks having gone on a journey, being scrupulous, did not bathe. They lay down with limbs covered with sweat. 4 dots. They told this matter to the Lord. He said, quote, I allow you monks at a time of going on a journey to bathe. Parentheses, at intervals of, close parentheses, less than half a month. And thus, monks, this rule of training should be set forth. Whatever monk should bathe, parentheses, at intervals of, close parentheses, less than half a month, except at a right time, there is an offense of expiation. This is a right time in this case. 3 dots. End quote. And thus this rule of training for monks came to be laid down by the Lord. Now at that time, several monks, making robes in the open air, became assailed by a dusty wind. And the god was raining little by little. The monks, being scrupulous, did not bathe. They lay down with damp limbs, robes and lodgings got soiled. They told this matter to the Lord. He said, quote, I allow you monks at a time of wind and rain to bathe, parentheses, at intervals of, close parentheses, less than half a month. And thus, monks, this rule of training should be set forth. Whatever monk should bathe, parentheses, at intervals of, close parentheses, less than half a month, except at a right time, there is an offense of expiation. In this case, this is a right time, thinking, a month and a half of summer remains, and, in parentheses, the first month of the rains, these are 2.5 months when there is hot weather, when there is fever weather, at a time of illness, at a time of work, at a time of going on a journey, at a time of wind and rain, this is a right time in this case. Whatever means 3 dots. Monk means 3 dots. Less than half a month means less than half a month. Should bathe means if he bathes with a chunam or with clay, in each action there is an offense of wrongdoing. When the bathing is completed, there is an offense of expiation. Except at a right time means setting aside a right time, setting a right time to one side. Hot weather means a month and a half of the summer remains. Fever weather means the first month of the rains. Thinking, these are the 2.5 months when there is hot weather. When there is fever weather, there may be bathing. Time of illness means, if there comes to be no comfort for one without bathing, thinking, it is a time of illness, there may be bathing. Time of work means even a cell comes to be cleaned, thinking it is a time of work, there may be bathing. So if you want to bathe, just clean up your cell. Then you can say, I was working. Loophole. Time of going on a journey means saying, we will go half a yojana. Is that like a kilometer? There may be bathing. There may be bathing when going. There may be bathing when gone. Cool. This must be when a lot of journeys started out. Now we know Shanzan's real motivation. Anyway, time of wind and rain means if monks become assailed by a dusty wind, if 2 or 3 drops of rain come to be fallen on the body, thinking it is a time of wind and rain, there may be bathing. If he thinks that it is less when it is less than half a month, parentheses, and close parentheses. So there was never any resolution about when you do bathe, don't bathe until like nighttime when there's a king sitting there. That was the original issue, but that is never addressed. So every 2 weeks you can go bathe and go to the king while he's over there waiting for you to finish bathing, because that was never addressed. Just how often you bathe. All right, okay. All right. I don't blame the Buddha. I blame whoever wrote this. I'm assuming that it was some monks saying, okay, this is how the story was, right? I think. I mean, it's evident from the fact that it's always the same phrase, how dare you, foolish monk. I mean, I think that he was a little more articulate than that. He didn't always use the same phrase. In real life, I mean. It would be interesting to take a time machine back and see what it was really like. Well, this is the closest we can get to knowing what it was really like, so. All right. Yes. If he thinks that it is less when it is less than half a month, parentheses, and, close parentheses, bathes, except at a right time, there is an offense of expiation. If he is in doubt as to whether it is less than half a month, 3 dots. If he thinks that it is more when it is less than half a month, 3 dots, offense of expiation. If he thinks that it is less when it is more than half a month, there is an offense of wrongdoing. If he is in doubt as to whether it is more than half a month, there is an offense of wrongdoing. If he thinks that it is more when it is more than half a month, there is no offense. There is no offense if it is at the right time. If he bathes at, parentheses, intervals of, close parentheses, the half month. If he bathes, parentheses, at intervals of, close parentheses, more than half a month. If he bathes going to the further bank, what does that mean? Param gachanto nahayanti. Always go to nahav gachrancho nahananchi, because then you can bathe. All right. If he is in nothing but bordering districts, if there are accidents, if he is mad, if he is the first wrongdoer, the 7th, meaning the 57th. All right. Well, did we read 2 or 3? Oh, yeah, we started with 54. So we read 4 rules. Do you remember what they are? No frightening people was one of them. No starting a fire, no warming yourself by the fire unless there is sufficient reason for it. No bathing except twice a month unless it's hot, or you've been working, or you went on a journey, or you're at the further bank, or it's windy. And the 4th one, future me, editing me, could you remind us what the 4th one of these was? In disrespect, there is an offense of expiation. Yes. Thank you. All right. Well, that was fun. Did you have fun? Let us take a moment. As I've mentioned before, I.B. Horner, the translator of these rules, passed away 19 years ago. So wherever she may be and on whatever plane, we forgive you. Blessings. All right. Anything else? Should I go ahead and close? I promise these will get better after I finish all 6 books of rules. So remember, check back in about a year, and this Edward Reeves Buddhist Books podcast will probably be starting to get good. But until then, if you're hardcore like me and you really want to read every word of the 3 baskets, then stay tuned. Until next time, I will go ahead and close. To the north and to the south, to the east and to the west, to the spirits of light among us, and to the spirits below, we send out our reverent love and compassion. May all beings be happy. May all beings be serene. May all beings be in peace. Have a good day, everyone.